The afternoon sun burned low over Tupelo, Mississippi, the kind of golden light that makes even dust sparkle like memory. A young boy ran down the dirt road, tears streaming down his face, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. His heart thudded louder than the footsteps chasing him in his imagination. His name was Elvis Presley, and this was the day the world almost lost its king. Before we go deeper into this incredible story, take a moment to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Join our growing community of music lovers and dreamers who believe that every legend begins with a broken moment. Because the story you're about to hear isn't just about music, it's about resilience, love, and a mother's faith that changed the course of history forever. The dirt on Elvis's overalls was still fresh from the playground. His shoes were worn thin, the soles flapped slightly with every desperate step. Behind him, the small brick schoolhouse faded into the distance, the sound of other children laughing still echoing in his mind, laughter that felt like arrows, sharp and cold. He had just been rejected from the school choir. The teacher's words rang in his ears, "Elvis, you can't sing." To a 10-year-old boy who had found his only joy in music, those 4 words hit harder than any punch. He had sung with all his heart, but his voice cracked in front of the class, nerves strangling the sound. Now, as he ran home, that single sentence felt like the end of something he didn't even understand yet. When he reached the small house at 306 Old Saltier Road, he burst through the door. His mother, Gladys Presley, dropped her sewing and rushed to him. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked, her voice trembling with maternal instinct. Elvis couldn't speak. He just held up the paper, a note from the choir teacher, and cried, "Mama, they said I can't sing." Gladys took the note and read it silently. The room fell quiet except for the distant hum of cicadas outside. Then she knelt in front of her boy, wiped the tears from his cheeks, and said something that would change the trajectory of his life. "Son, don't you ever believe them. You were born to sing. Maybe not for them, but for the world." Those words became his first anthem. That night, Gladys took Elvis by the hand and led him to the small church down the road. Inside, the wooden pews glowed under the light of oil lamps, and the air was thick with the sound of gospel hymns. The voices rose in harmony, raw, imperfect, human. Elvis listened, mesmerized. When he sang quietly along, something stirred inside him, a spark he would chase for the rest of his life. In that church, surrounded by faith and song, the king of rock and roll was born, not yet in name, not yet in fame, but in soul. Years later, the same boy who had been told he couldn't sing stood on stage in Las Vegas under blinding lights, his white jumpsuit glimmering like a constellation. Thousands screamed his name, "Elvis! Elvis!" Cameras flashed, the orchestra swelled, and for a moment he closed his eyes, and thought of that day in Tupelo. The rejection. The tears. His mother's voice. It had all led here. Elvis Presley, the boy with dirt on his shoes and fire in his heart, had become the voice of a generation. But the road from that small schoolhouse to global stardom was not paved in gold. It was built on heartbreak, humility, and hope. In his teenage years, Elvis never forgot how that choir teacher made him feel. Instead of bitterness, he turned that pain into purpose. He practiced alone, sometimes singing to the walls of their small home, sometimes to the stars outside his window. Music became his refuge. He studied gospel quartets and blues musicians on the radio, blending the sacred and the soulful until they became something entirely new, something the world had never heard before. When he was 16, he walked into Sun Records in Memphis to record a song for his mother's birthday. The studio was small, hot, and filled with the smell of dust and vinyl. He nervously handed over $4 and stepped up to the microphone. The moment his voice filled the room, something electric happened. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling, a pulse, a revolution waiting to be born. The man behind the control board, Sam Phillips, couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. It wasn't polished, but it was alive. Phillips would later say, I was looking for a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel. In that moment, he found it, though Elvis never tried to imitate anyone. He simply sang the way his soul demanded. Within a year, the world knew his name. That's All Right hit the airwaves in 1954, and radio stations lit up with phone calls. Listeners couldn't tell if he was black or white, and they didn't care. They just knew the music felt like freedom. It was the beginning of the Elvis Presley phenomenon, the story that would rewrite not just music, but culture itself. But behind the fame, the same shy boy still lived inside him. The untold story of Elvis Presley isn't just about the stages he conquered, it's about the silence that followed when the curtain fell. He never forgot how fragile a dream could be. The adoration of millions didn't fill the quiet space his mother once did. When Gladys passed away in 1958, a part of him dimmed forever. Friends recalled how he sat by her grave for hours, unable to speak, only whispering her name. "She was my everything," he said later, his voice cracking like that same little boy's long ago. The king of rock and roll was untouchable on stage, but off it, he was just a son who still needed his mother's faith. It's this humanity that makes his story timeless. The world saw the hips, the swagger, the rebellion. But beneath that was a tenderness few understood. Elvis was a dreamer who carried the weight of a promise to a mother who once told him he was meant to sing for the world. That he kept that promise, song after song, night after night. Can't Help Falling in Love. Suspicious Minds. Love Me Tender. Every note was a thread back to that childhood church, back to the warmth of Gladys's hand, back to the rejection that lit the fuse. Even at his height, when he performed before presidents and sold-out stadiums, he remained haunted by that one sentence: "You can't sing." It became the ghost he danced with on every stage. And perhaps that's why his performances were so raw, so desperate, so full of feeling. He wasn't just singing songs, he was proving something to the boy he once was. Imagine it now. Las Vegas, 1970. The lights dim. The orchestra hushes. The curtains part, and the crowd rises as Elvis steps forward, a single spotlight following him. The first note escapes his lips, and suddenly, the room breathes again. People cry. Some faint. Others stand motionless, overwhelmed by something they can't explain. That's not just talent. That's destiny. What no one in that audience knew was that backstage, before every show, Elvis would take a quiet moment. He'd look at himself in the mirror, cross his heart, and whisper a prayer, not for fame, but for strength. "Mama," he'd say softly, "I'm singing for you." That's the soul of Elvis Presley, the untold story that he wasn't the king because of his fame or fortune. He was the king because he never stopped being the boy who ran home crying and found redemption through music. The crown he wore wasn't made of gold, it was forged from pain, faith, and love. The decades passed, and the legend grew. Movies, records, crowds that stretched for miles. Yet those close to him say his favorite moments were always the simplest, sitting at a piano late at night, playing gospel songs that reminded him of home. Sometimes he'd call the band together after shows and sing until sunrise. "This," he'd say with a smile, "this is what it's all about." He missed his mother until the end. Fame couldn't fill that space. Even Graceland, with its endless halls and chandeliers, sometimes felt too big for one man's heart. But whenever he sang, she was there, in every note, every breath, every tear. There's a story his cousin Billy Smith once told, about how Elvis, just weeks before his death, sat alone at the piano and whispered, "You know, sometimes I still hear her telling me to keep singing." Then he played a soft, haunting melody. No audience. No cameras. Just a sun, a song, and a memory. That moment, more than any concert or movie, defines Elvis Presley, the untold story. It's not about superstardom or excess. It's about a mother's belief that survived time, pain, and even death. so when people call him the king of rock and roll, they often picture the glitter, the fame, the fury. But those who truly listen, who close their eyes and hear the trembling heart behind the voice, know he was never just a king. He was a testament to what love can build, from rejection that he turned no into music, that he turned tears into rhythm, that he turned a small-town heartbreak into a global symphony. And somewhere, if the legends are true, Gladys Presley smiled from above, whispering to the stars, "I told you, baby. You were born to sing." Elvis's story reminds us that greatness doesn't begin with applause. It begins in the silence of doubt, in the echo of someone telling you that you're not enough. His life was proof that the heart's truest songs are born in moments of pain, and that even the loneliest child can grow up to move the world. So the next time you hear his voice, close your eyes. Picture that boy running home, holding that crumpled note. Feel the dust, the tears, the fire inside him. Because that's where the legend began, not on stage, but on a dirt road in Tupelo, where a mother's love turned rejection into destiny. This is Elvis Presley. This is the untold story. This is the heartbeat of the king of rock and roll. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own battles, your own dreams, or your own mother's faith, don't let it fade away. Subscribe, like, share, and comment below. Tell us what Elvis means to you. Every story, every memory, every tear shared keeps his spirit alive, because legends never die, they just change key. And somewhere, out there, Elvis is still singing.